Joining me now, Mychael Schnell, congressional reporter at The Hill, Navin Nayak, president of the Center for American Progress Action Fund, and Rob Bluey, president and executive editor of the Daily Signal. So, Mychael, we know that President Trump has said that he's reassured Americans that Congress won't touch things like Medicaid. Now we're hearing HHS is offering mass buyouts here. How is this landing on Capitol Hill?
I suspect it's going to feed into those Democratic concerns about the fate and the future of Medicaid. We heard a lot about that from Democrats when House Republicans passed their budget resolution, which, not to bore everyone with the details, but a high number of cuts from energy and commerce. Medicaid falls under that jurisdiction. A lot of folks saying you can't get to that number without touching Medicaid. Now, President Trump has reassured folks that he doesn't want to significantly alter Medicaid. We've also heard that from House GOP leaders. But of course, when you're talking about messaging in Washington, sometimes those specifics are overlooked. I specifically think that Democrats are likely to run with this, say that there may be some concerns that if specific staffers at HHS take a buyout or are laid off, that could impact Medicaid. So this, I think, will add fuel to the fire. Again, though, folks are going to look at the particulars of what the actual impact of these moves are. And
I was going to ask you, is the White House potentially playing with fire here? As you think about, we talk about the IRS seeing cuts potentially during tax season. Now you have HHS, Medicare potentially seeing job cuts where people are concerned about their health care. It's not popular to cut government it is popular until it touches you somehow. Is the White House playing with fire?
Yeah, I think that we're seeing the rubber hit the road right now, right? We had heard from President Trump on the campaign trail in his beginning weeks in office saying he wants to significantly alter and decrease the size and scope of the federal government. Well, we're actually seeing that come into play. And we've actually heard from several lawmakers up on Capitol Hill, Democrats and Republicans, speaking out about some of these cuts, as you mentioned, when they hit their district. One example, Congressman Derek Van Orden, Republican from Wisconsin, was meeting with Elon Musk in the Capitol last week. And he raised concerns about the impact some of these cuts could have on farmers and veterans, two groups that are significant in his district. So to your point, I think that when it hits folks in their districts, when they get an earful from constituents at some of these town halls, that's when it may be difficult to defend. But again, we're still working through the process here and seeing what these cuts are.
All right, Rob, I want to play something that President Trump said in the Oval Office last week and then ask you a question about this.
I want the cabinet members to keep good people. I don't want to see a big cut where a lot of good people are cut. I want the cabinet members to keep the good people, and the people that aren't doing a good job, that are unreliable, don't show up to work, etc., those people can be cut.
So we heard the president say he wants to see the use of a scalpel as opposed to a hatchet that people have been saying we've been seeing with Elon Musk to this point. Does it look like he wants these cuts to sort of slow down? Might there be some concern that maybe the speed and style here aren't landing well with folks out in America?
Aaron, I think it's important to take a step back and remember we have a $2 trillion budget deficit, so there will have to be cuts if we want to get to the point of balancing. And I think that's ultimately where the president and Elon Musk want to get. When it comes to HHS or any other department, we also know that many of these employees don't align with the president's agenda. In fact, there was a poll from the Napolitan Institute that came out in January that showed that nearly half of federal managers did not agree with the president and would work against him to resist his agenda. And so I think that if they are offering a buyout and there's a voluntary separation, they should take that opportunity. And that's a way for not only the federal government to save money in the long term, but it's a way for those individuals who aren't in concert with the president to maybe take a different path.
So do you think there's any logic then to people who are saying that the issue is not the what, the issue is the how? People are uncomfortable or bothered by how things have been happening, hatchet, as opposed to scalpel.
As you said, nobody likes to cut government spending, right? They talk a good game, but when it actually impacts you directly, that's when people tend to have issues with it. That's why I think Musk so far has been probably more effective than politicians on Capitol Hill, because he's been willing to make those tough calls. Is it going to affect everybody the same way? Yeah, there are going to be people who are naturally upset. I recognize that, and I have sympathy for those who are affected personally.
Navin, jump in here. You look like
I think this is madness, and I think we all see it as madness, and I think it was a great story until they actually had to start executing it. We have a bird flu epidemic that's growing in the animal population. Where's the strategy to how to deal with that? We have a measles outbreak in Texas, in New Mexico. Is there any sense that they're trying to protect people who actually do that? This is absolute madness. It's the way you govern Twitter. That is fine. If you want to get rid of the coders and the system falls down, that's fine. What people are learning now is that when you take this approach that Elon Musk and Donald Trump has approved, that every Republican on Capitol Hill owns and is abiding by, People are dying. People like services for veterans are being cut. Child care centers are not opening. People are not being paid. There's real consequences to this approach. And I think it is the way they're governing. And either it's intentional and cruel by nature, or they're just plain old stupid and don't know what they're doing.
We've been watching Democrats and how they've been dealing with or not dealing with some of what's been going on here. And I should say that we know that the Agriculture Secretary has rolled out a bird flu initiative to try to tackle that issue. But for Democrats, back in 2018, Democrats didn't run on sort of the tumult of Trump at the time. They ran on health care. Are there openings here for Democrats that they should be taking advantage of when you think about making cuts to HHS, for example? Yeah,
and I think Michael mentioned that the Medicaid cuts is going to be front and center, and part of that is because Republicans, including Donald Trump, are just plain lying. It is very clear. There's an analysis by CBO that came out last week that said they cannot meet what their budget says without cutting Medicaid. It's plain and simple. So whatever Donald Trump wants to tell you, it is absolutely a lie. And Mike Johnson and everyone else in Congress who's telling you they're not going to cut Medicaid, they are on track to cut at least, and this is clear, at least $880 billion. That's the low end of what they're going to cut. 72 million Americans depend on Medicaid. That is going to absolutely be front and center for the American people. But all these other cuts from DOGE, we're just seeing the effects trickle and grow and expand. And I think it's a huge problem for Republicans.
I just don't see how you get to balance, though, without it. I mean, that's...
Well, why don't you start by not cutting taxes for the wealthy by $5 trillion? That would be a starting point. Republicans are not serious about cutting the budget. That is not something Elon Musk is continuing. I mean, the Washington Post report on this, $38 billion that man has gotten from the federal government. He is more than happy to take his share. He's keeping all of that. There's no talk of DOGE, cutting Starlink, cutting Tesla grants. No. We're going to go after things American people depend on.
And by the way, all Americans do benefit from those tax cuts, not
just
the
public. He doesn't need the EV tax credits anymore because his company he thinks is fine.
Michael, I do want to ask you, we talked a little bit earlier about mixed messages on the economy that some folks are expressing concerns about coming from this Trump White House. One of the latest things we heard today was from the NEC director, Kevin Hassett. I want to play this, him blaming some poor economic indicators on Joe Biden.
Near term, we've got a Biden economy that, still most of Biden policies are in place. If you look at the Atlanta Fed GDP now number, it's showing negative first quarter, which is kind of, if you like, a metric of the inheritance of President Biden. This quarter, there are some blips in the data, including the negative GDP now, which are related both to the Biden inheritance and to some, timing effects that are happening ahead of tariffs.
So economic indicators were largely better at the beginning of January, but is this excuse, this idea from the White House, something that's going to last? Are we going to see them be able to blame Biden for any issues that pop up?
Probably not, because the likelihood of that working and being salient among voters decreases as we get farther away from the Biden White House. And I think that we're going to start seeing some more concerns on Capitol Hill from Republican lawmakers about these indicators and about the state of the economy, not to mention that Democrats have been hammering Republicans about it for weeks now. But Republicans are going to continue to hear from their constituents. Prices are rising. The stock market is going down. The Dow Jones closing at down 2% today. These are going to be concerns among voters. And if lawmakers end up getting an earful at some of these town halls, which have so far been noteworthy, so much so that Republican leaders are encouraging their members to have teletown halls and not in-person town halls, they're going to have to start answering for this. And I don't think blaming the Biden White House is going to work as we continue to get through the year. Because, again, you get farther away from the Biden White House, it's going to start to land on Trump's desk.
Trump doesn't have to run again, but there are lots of Republicans who do have to run again. Do we at some point see a break from the party, the rest of the party with President Trump as a result of the fact that he doesn't have to worry about getting more votes?
I doubt it, based on what history tells us. I mean, it seems that Republicans will continue along and support Donald Trump. I will say that one of the indicators that I think Trump should be paying attention to is Americans' personal finances. That was an indicator early on that Joe Biden was not doing well, and it didn't bode well for Kamala Harris either.
I will say that one of the cracks we've already started seeing a little bit is with the tariffs. Some Republican lawmakers raising concerns about the on and off nature of the tariffs and the impacts that they're having on the economy.
Right. We have run out of time. Extra question to you next time around, Navin. Navin, Michael, Rob, appreciate you all. Thank you. After the break,